They thought I was asleep, just another old woman dozing in her creaky rocking chair, fading into the wallpaper of their lives. But that night, I heard everything. Every word, every cruel laugh, every detail of their plan to steal what they believed was already theirs. They didn't know I wasn't just listening. I'd been preparing for this moment longer than they could imagine. And when the time came, my blade would fall with the precision and coldness of winter's first frost. My name is Margaret Lawson, and at 74 years old, I've learned that the most dangerous moments in life come disguised as ordinary evenings. That autumn night started like any other in my Montana home, with the wind rattling the old oak's branches against my window and the familiar creak of my rocking chair keeping time with my breathing. I'd settled into my usual spot by the fireplace after dinner, the warmth making my eyelids heavy, or so they thought. My son Evan and his wife Sophie had arrived earlier that day for what they called a routine visit, though nothing about their visits had been routine for years. They waited until they believed I drifted off, my head tilted back, hands folded over the quilt I'd made 40 years ago. "She's out," Sophie whispered, her voice carrying that sharp edge I'd grown to recognize as contempt. God, how long do we have to keep pretending? I kept my breathing steady, deep and rhythmic, the way sleep had taken me thousands of nights before. Through barely open eyes, I watched their shadows move across the wall. The lawyer said he could have the papers ready by Monday, Evan replied. My son, my only child, the boy I'd carried for 9 months, nursed through fevers, taught to ride a bike on this very property. We just need her signature, and then we can move forward with Pleasant Acres. Pleasant Acres. The nursing home 2 towns over, where they warehouse the elderly like forgotten furniture. I'd visited a friend there once. The smell of industrial disinfectant couldn't mask the scent of despair. And the land? Sophie's greed practically dripped from her words. Once she's declared incompetent, we'll have full control. The mining company's offer is still on the table. $8.5 million for the whole property. $8.5 million. They'd done their homework, but they didn't know everything. Thank God. Sophie laughed, a sound like breaking glass. I'm so tired of coming out to this dump. That disgusting tree in the front yard, this moldy old house. We could be living in Denver, Miami, anywhere but this wasteland. The tree she spoke of was a 200-year-old oak my great-grandfather had carved his initials in when he first claimed this land. The moldy old house had sheltered 4 generations of Lawsons, including Evan himself for 18 years. Keep your voice down, Evan warned, though he made no real effort to defend my home or me. Please, Sophie scoffed. She's practically comatose half the time anyway. Yesterday, I found her talking to that stupid doll collection again. We're doing her a favor. She needs professional care. They moved into the kitchen, but their voices carried through the thin walls. I heard the clink of glasses, my good bourbon, no doubt, and the rustle of papers. Richardson says the power of attorney documents are airtight, Evan continued. Once she signs, thinking it's just routine medical paperwork, we're golden. She trusts me. Those 3 words cut deeper than any blade could. She trusts me. And if she refuses, she won't. I'll tell her it's for her Medicare. Something about new regulations. She gets confused with all that government stuff anyway. Confused? They thought I was confused. I who had managed this ranch alone for 15 years after Harold died, who'd fought off developers and government agents trying to steal our water rights, who'd raised a son while working the land and keeping the books. The best part, Sophie giggled, the bourbon making her louder, is she actually thinks she's leaving us something meaningful, like this patch of dirt is some kind of legacy. $8.5 million is pretty meaningful to me. Evan laughed. They talked for another hour, planning my erasure with the casual efficiency of people planning a vacation. They'd already contacted realtors, looked at condos in Aspen, priced out European cars. My life's work had become their lottery ticket. When they finally stumbled off to bed in the guest room, the room where Evan had been conceived, where my mother had died, where countless Christmases had been celebrated, I remained perfectly still. Only when I heard their snores competing with each other did I allow myself to move. My hands weren't shaking. At 74, after burying parents, a husband, and countless friends, very little could make Margaret Lawson's hands shake, but rage, cold and pure as Montana snowmelt, flowed through my veins. They thought I was asleep, but I'd been awake all along, watching, waiting, preparing for the moment when the masks would finally slip. And now that they had, it was time to show them just how alert this old woman could be. The cracks in our family foundation had been forming for years, like frost working its way into granite. I should have seen it coming. But mothers have a particular blindness when it comes to their children. We see what we hope for, not always what is. The first major fracture came 3 years ago. Representatives from Sentinel Mining Corporation had approached me with an offer for the mineral rights to our land. They'd done their surveys, found significant copper deposits beneath our eastern pastures. Evan had driven up from Denver the moment he heard, eyes bright with possibility. "Mom, this is it," he'd said, spreading their glossy brochures across my kitchen table. "This could set us up for life. You could travel, move somewhere warmer, live comfortably. I am comfortable," I'd told him. "And I've seen what those mines do. They poison the groundwater, tear up the land, leave nothing but scars when they're done." His face had darkened then, a stranger's expression on my son's features. "You're being selfish. That money could help Emily go to college." Emily, my granddaughter, who I'd seen exactly twice in 5 years. "Emily's education is already taken care of," I'd said quietly. What I didn't say was that I'd been setting aside money for her since she was born, that her college fund was healthy and waiting. Some cards you don't show, even to family. "This is insane." He'd slammed his hand on the table, making me jump. "You're sitting on millions and living like some kind of hermit. Dad would have taken this deal in a heartbeat." That was when I knew he didn't understand Harold at all. My husband had loved this land more than anything except our family. He died protecting it, having a heart attack while fighting a grass fire that threatened our northern border. Evan had been away at college, too busy to come home for the summer. He'd missed his father's last 3 years, missed understanding what this place meant to us. The second crack came with Sophie. She'd always been cold, but I'd attributed it to her upbringing. Old money from Connecticut, the kind of people who show affection through wire transfers. The incident with the oak tree revealed her true nature. "It's a hazard," she'd announced during Thanksgiving dinner 2 years ago, pointing her fork at my great-grandfather's tree. "One good storm and it could fall on the house. Plus, we need more parking when we visit. That tree has weathered storms since before Montana was a state." I'd said, "It's not going anywhere." She'd hired a tree service anyway, without telling me. I'd met them in my driveway with Harold's old shotgun. Not loaded, but they didn't know that. Sophie had screamed about me being unstable, threatening to call the police. Evan had taken her side, but it was the doll that showed me how deep their contempt ran. Last Christmas, I'd spent weeks making a special gift for Emily. She was 13, probably too old for dolls, but this wasn't just any doll. I'd crafted it to look like my grandmother, her great-great-grandmother, using a photograph from 1890. Hand-stitched the period clothing, embroidered tiny flowers on the dress, even made little button boots. When Emily opened it, her face had lit up. "It's beautiful, Grandma." She'd held it carefully, understanding instinctively that this was something special, something with history. Sophie had laughed, that brittle sound that meant nothing good. "Oh, Em, don't feel like you have to keep that. I know Grandma means well, but honestly, who gives homemade dolls anymore? It's like something from a horror movie." She'd taken it from Emily's hands and tossed it into the garbage bag with the wrapping paper. "We'll get you something nice from the American Girl store instead." Emily's face had crumbled, but she'd said nothing. Evan had said nothing. I'd said nothing, but I'd retrieved that doll later, cleaned coffee grounds off its dress, and put it in Emily's room for her to find. She'd hidden it in her suitcase when they left, and that small act of rebellion had given me hope. These memories flooded back as I sat in my chair that night, listening to them plan my disposal. They weren't isolated incidents anymore, but a clear pattern. Every visit, every interaction had been them enduring me, waiting for me to die or become weak enough to control. The joke was on them. I'd been preparing for this longer than they knew. Every slight, every cruel word, every dismissal of what mattered to me had been a lesson. They'd taught me well that family could be the deepest betrayal of all. But they'd also taught me that an old woman's greatest weapon was being underestimated. They saw my age, my isolation, my attachment to the old ways, and they mistook these for weakness. They were wrong. And soon, very soon, they would learn just how wrong they were. My secret began with Harold's death 15 years ago, along with the Montana ranch everyone knew about. He'd left me a piece of land in Wyoming that his father had won in a poker game back in 1948. Scrubland, everyone said, worthless. Harold had never even bothered to fence it. But Harold had been smarter than people gave him credit for. He'd held on to that land through decades of tax bills and offers from neighboring ranchers. Sometimes the best crops take the longest to grow, Maggie. He'd told me. He was right. 3 years after his death, they found natural gas deposits throughout that region. My worthless scrubland sat right on top of a fortune. I sold it quietly to Endeavor Energy for $15 million. Cash. The kind of deal that happens with handshakes and private lawyers, not press releases. I told no one, not even Evan, especially not Evan, who by then was already showing signs of the greed that would eventually consume him. The money went into trusts and investments across 3 different states. I hired attorneys in Cheyenne, advisors in Denver, accountants in Salt Lake City. Each knew only their piece of my financial puzzle. The paper trail was clean but complex, designed to protect the money from anyone who might come looking for it with bad intentions. I lived the same as always. Same truck, same clothes from the farm supplies store, same weekly grocery trips where I'd clip coupons and compare prices on canned goods. Let them all think Margaret Lawson was land rich and cash poor. It was safer that way. But the real masterpiece of my planning involved the Montana ranch itself. 5 years ago, I'd met with representatives from the Nature Conservancy at a conference in Billings. They were looking for land to preserve, places with historical and ecological significance. My ranch, with its untouched grasslands, seasonal creek, and nesting grounds for sandhill cranes, was exactly what they wanted. We structured it as a living donation with a life estate. The papers were signed, notarized, and filed with the county. The ranch already belonged to them. I just had the right to live here until I died. After that, it would become a permanent preserve, never to be developed, mined or subdivided. The contract was ironclad, irreversible. Even I couldn't change it if I wanted to. The beautiful part was how the legal language worked. On paper, I still owned the ranch for all practical purposes. Property tax records showed my name. No one checking casual records would see anything unusual. But the real ownership, the ability to sell or transfer the land, that was gone. Given away freely to ensure its protection forever. I'd even built in protections against challenges. The Conservancy had deep pockets and good lawyers. Any attempt to overturn the donation would trigger immediate enforcement clauses. They could take possession within 72 hours if anyone tried to interfere with the agreement. Sitting in my chair that night, listening to Evan and Sophie plan their future with my land, I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. They were dividing up an inheritance that had vanished like morning mist years ago. $8.5 million from the mining company? They might as well plan on harvesting moonbeams. My preparations went beyond just the money and land. I'd been playing the part of the failing elder for 2 years now, carefully crafting an image of decline. I'd let my hair go a bit wilder, moved a little slower when they visited, repeated stories I'd already told. Nothing dramatic. That would raise suspicion. Just enough to make them comfortable in their assumptions. The doll collection Sophie mocked, each one was worth thousands to collectors, but I displayed them casually, like drugstore toys. The moldy old house contained first edition books, Native American artifacts, and artwork that museums would kill for. but dust covers and strategic placement made everything look like yard sale fodder. I'd learned from the best deceiver I'd ever known, my own mother. She'd survived the Depression by hiding assets from everyone, including my father. Coffee cans buried in the garden, bills sewn into coat linings, silver painted black to look like cheap tin. "Never let them see everything you have, Margaret," she'd told me. "The moment they know what you're worth is the moment they start calculating what you owe them." Even my allies were carefully chosen and compartmentalized. My lawyer in Bozeman thought I was a sweet old woman with modest needs. My financial advisor in Wyoming believed I was a reclusive investor. The Conservancy knew me as a passionate environmentalist. None knew the whole picture. But tomorrow, when Evan and Sophie made their move with their fraudulent papers and their patronizing smiles, they'd learn that the fortune they'd stayed up drinking to was as substantial as smoke. They'd discover that the confused old woman they'd planned to warehouse had been 3 steps ahead of them all along. My secret wasn't just the money or the land protection. It was the knowledge that while they'd been plotting my demise, I'd been orchestrating their downfall. They thought they were predators circling failing prey. They were wrong. I was the predator, and tomorrow, the trap would snap shut. The art of appearing weak while remaining strong is a delicate dance. For 2 years, I'd choreographed every stumble, orchestrated every moment of confusion, directed every scene of my supposed decline. It started small, a forgotten name here, a repeated story there. Nothing that would alarm, just enough to plant seeds of assumption. When Evan called, I'd sometimes let the phone ring longer than necessary, then answer with a quavering, "Hello, who is this?" Even though his number was programmed into my phone during their visits. I'd occasionally call Sophie by the wrong name, Susan or Sarah, then apologize profusely. She'd roll her eyes and correct me with barely concealed irritation, never suspecting it was deliberate. I'd leave bills on the counter with overdue stamps visible, though every account was current and set to autopay. My checkbook would be out with entries showing small math errors, the kind that suggested a mind losing its grip on numbers. The errors always favored the bank, making me look vulnerable to financial exploitation. The masterstroke was my strategic relationship with Dr. Patricia Winters, my physician in town. She was a sharp woman who understood immediately when I explained my concerns about family members who might seek control over my affairs. Without lying or compromising her ethics, she helped me create a medical record that showed normal aging without any actual cognitive decline. Her notes were carefully worded. Patient occasionally reports memory lapses rather than any clinical diagnosis, enough to support my act, nothing that could be used against me legally. I'd even staged small incidents when Evan and Sophie visited. Once, I'd left the stove burner on under an empty kettle until it whistled dry. Sophie had rushed in, dramatically turning it off while lecturing me about safety. Another time, I'd forgotten to take my medications, leaving the weekly pill organizer obviously full on a Thursday. These calculated mistakes painted a picture of someone who needed supervision. The grocery store performances were particularly effective. I'd stand in the cereal aisle looking confused, asking young clerks to help me find items that were right in front of me. Word traveled fast in a small town. Soon, neighbors were telling Evan how sweet but forgetful his mother had become. He'd call more frequently after those reports, his voice carrying that mixture of concern and calculation that told me my plan was working. Physical presentation mattered, too, when alone. I walked straight, moved quickly, kept my mind sharp with crossword puzzles and online courses in subjects that interested me. But when they visited, I'd add a slight stoop to my shoulders, move more deliberately, occasionally reach for furniture as if needing support. I'd wear the same house dress 2 days in a row, something the old Margaret would never do. The props in my home told their own story. Reading glasses left in odd places, the refrigerator, the bathroom cabinet suggested confusion. A calendar with appointments written on the wrong dates, though I kept the real schedule on my phone. Unopened mail piled on the table. Though I'd actually handled everything important online, I learned to bite my tongue when they talked down to me. "Mom, remember, you need to pay the electric bill," Evan would say slowly, as if I were a child. I'd nod gratefully and make a show of writing it down, while knowing the bill had been paid 3 weeks ago. Sophie would rearrange my medications, explaining each pill's purpose in a patronizing tone, never knowing I had a complete duplicate set properly organized in my bedroom. The hardest part was allowing them to make decisions for me. When they insisted on changing my internet provider to save money, I protested weakly, then acquiesced, though the new service was actually inferior. When Sophie threw out my expired canned goods that were perfectly fine, I let her, then restocked when they left. Each small victory made them bolder, more certain of my helplessness. But underneath the performance, I was sharp as ever. I read legal journals online, studying elder law and financial exploitation statutes. I monitored my credit reports religiously, watched for any unusual activity, kept meticulous records of every interaction. My confused old lady act was backed by the strategic mind of someone who'd run a ranch solo for 15 years. The beauty of the deception was its believability. Adult children want to see aging parents as needing help. It justifies their interventions, soothes their guilt about not visiting more, and sometimes feeds their greed. I gave them exactly what they expected to see, a widow gradually losing her independence. Prime for manipulation, in my bedroom, hidden in a false bottom drawer Harold had built years ago. I kept my real documents, bank statements showing robust accounts, investment portfolios performing beautifully, correspondence with attorneys and financial advisors, the paper trail of a woman in full control of her faculties and fortune. Sometimes, late at night, I'd look in the mirror and see both versions of myself, the failing elder I portrayed and the shrewd strategist I remained. It was exhausting maintaining the facade, but necessary. They'd shown me who they were. The least I could do was return the favor, right until the moment the mask came off. Tomorrow, they'd arrive with their lawyer and their lies, confident in their assessment of a weak old woman ready to be plucked. They had no idea they were walking into a carefully constructed trap, one I'd spent years perfecting. The confused elderly woman they thought they knew was about to vanish, like smoke, leaving behind someone far more dangerous, a mother who'd seen through their charade and prepared accordingly. The morning arrived crisp and clear, the kind of Montana day that made the mountains look close enough to touch. I was up at 5:30 a.m. as always, but I stayed in bed until 7, maintaining the illusion. When I finally emerged in my worn bathrobe, hair deliberately uncombed, Evan and Sophie were already in the kitchen, transforming it into their stage. "Morning, Mom," Evan said, his voice dripping with false cheer. He'd made coffee, my coffee in my kitchen, and was arranging papers on the table with the precision of someone setting a trap. "How did you sleep?" "Oh, I said vaguely, shuffling to my chair. "The old bones don't rest like they used to." I noticed they'd moved my pill organizer to the center of the table, a subtle reminder of my supposed vulnerability. Sophie bustled about with theatrical efficiency, setting out my favorite mug, the one with the chip on the handle. "We made you breakfast. Margaret, you need to keep your strength up." She placed a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of me, cut into small pieces as if I were a toddler who might choke. "That's very thoughtful, dear," I said, deliberately calling her dear because I knew she hated it. My hands shook slightly as I reached for the fork, a practiced tremor I'd perfected in front of the mirror. The lawyer arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, Richard Mallory, according to his business card, though something about him screamed fake from his 2 white teeth to his knockoff designer suit. He had the oily demeanor of someone who specialized in exploiting the elderly, all smiles and loud, slow speech. "Mrs. Lawson, what a pleasure to meet you." He grabbed my hand in both of his, pumping it enthusiastically. "Evan has told me so much about you. What a lovely home you have here." I played my part, looking confused but pleased by the attention. "Thank you, young man." Are you here about the insurance? I sometimes forget to pay the premiums." Evan and Sophie exchanged glances. Perfect. Let them think I was already mixing up financial obligations. No, Mom, Evan said, guiding me back to my chair. Mister, Mallory is here to help us with some paperwork. Just routine stuff to make sure you're protected. Protected? I blinked owlishly at them. Protected from what? From complications. Mallory jumped in smoothly. You know how complex things can get with Medicare, Social Security, property taxes. We're just going to simplify everything for you. They'd rehearsed this well. Sophie poured more coffee, keeping my cup full, probably hoping caffeine would make me more compliant. Evan sat close, his hand on my arm in what appeared to be filial affection, but felt more like restraint. Now, Mrs. Lawson. Mallory opened his briefcase with a flourish, revealing a stack of official-looking documents. These papers will ensure that Evan can help you with your affairs if you ever need assistance. It's called a durable power of attorney. Very standard. I peered at the papers, squinting as if I couldn't quite make out the words. In reality, I could see perfectly. The document was even more extensive than I'd expected. Not just power of attorney, but provisions that would give Evan complete control over all assets. The ability to sell property, access bank accounts, even make medical decisions. I don't understand all this legal language, I said, my voice quavering. Harold always handled these things. Of course, Mallory soothed. That's why you have Evan. He just wants to take care of you. Sophie produced a pen. Expensive, heavy. The kind designed to make signing feel significant. Here, Margaret, just sign where the little arrows are. Then we can all relax. I took the pen, feeling its weight. My hand trembled more noticeably now. They all leaned in, vultures waiting for the kill. Evan's breathing had quickened. Sophie's fingers drummed silently on the table. Mallory's smile was so wide it must have hurt. Where do I sign again? I asked, touching the pen to the wrong line. No, Mom, here. Evan guided my hand to the correct spot, his eagerness making him rough. I started to write my name, then stopped. Oh, I forgot my reading glasses. I shouldn't sign anything I can't read properly. Harold always said that. Mom, it's fine. Evan's voice carried an edge of frustration. We've explained everything. Have you? I looked at him with innocent eyes. I'm sorry, dear. I just get so confused these days. Maybe I should have my lawyer look at this first. What was his name? Mr. You don't have a lawyer, Mom, Evan said firmly. Remember? That's why we're here to help. I set the pen down, my hand still shaking but my mind crystal clear. The morning sun slanted through the kitchen window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It felt like the moment before a storm, when the whole world holds its breath. You're right, I said finally. I am getting confused. Maybe we should do this another day when I'm feeling sharper. The disappointment on their faces was almost comical. Mallory started to protest, but I raised a trembling hand. No, I insist. You've all been so kind, but I need to think. At my age, thinking takes time. They had no choice but to agree, though I could see the frustration simmering beneath their practiced smiles. They thought they'd had me. They thought the old woman was ready to sign her life away for the promise of being taken care of. They had no idea that everything from my confused questions to my trembling hands to my perfect timing in forgetting my glasses had been choreographed. The real show was about to begin, and they wouldn't like the final act one bit. Actually, I said, just as Mallory was closing his briefcase, I've changed my mind. Let's get this done now. You're all here, and who knows when my mind will be this clear again. The transformation on their faces was instant surprise melting into satisfaction. Evan actually smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen from him all morning. Sophie's shoulders relaxed. Mallory fumbled to reopen his briefcase, nearly dropping it in his eagerness. Wonderful decision. Mrs. Lawson, he gushed, spreading the papers out again. You won't regret this. Oh, but they would. I reached for my purse, the ancient leather bag I'd carried for 20 years. Just let me get my glasses. They must be in here somewhere. I rummaged through it, past tissues and peppermints, until my fingers found the sealed envelope I'd placed there at 4 a.m. this morning. What's this? I pulled it out, examining it with fabricated confusion. Oh, I remember now. My nice lawyer, mister. Brennan gave me this last month. Said I should show it to anyone who asked me to sign papers. The color drained from Evan's face. What lawyer? Mom, you don't have... Of course I do, dear. I opened the envelope with deliberate slowness, unfolding the documents inside. Such a nice young man. He helped me with that land donation. You remember, don't you? I told you about it at Christmas. I hadn't, of course. I'd told them nothing. Land donation? Sophie's voice pitched higher. What land donation? I spread the papers on the table, right on top of their fraudulent documents, the conservation easement deed, the irrevocable charitable trust agreement. The transfer of title, all dated 5 years ago, all properly notarized, all absolutely binding. This land, I said simply, the ranch, I donated it to the Nature Conservancy. They were so grateful. Said it would be preserved forever for the Sandhill cranes. Mallory grabbed the papers, scanning them with growing alarm. His fake smile vanished entirely. This can't be legal. She wasn't of sound mind. 5 years ago, I interrupted, my voice suddenly sharp and clear. 5 years ago when I negotiated the donation, structured the tax benefits, and retained a life estate. Tell me, Mr. Mallory, exactly when did I lose my sound mind? The room went silent except for the ticking of Harold's old clock on the wall. I straightened in my chair, letting the confused old woman facade drop like a discarded coat. You can't sell what I don't own, I continued. Haven't owned for half a decade. The mining company's $8.5 million? The Nature Conservancy's lawyers will tie that up in court for the next century. The land can never be developed, mined, or sold, ever. You crazy old bitch, Sophie hissed, her mask finally slipping completely. You gave away millions. My millions, I corrected, to give away as I saw fit, just like the $15 million from the Wyoming property I sold years ago. Oh, didn't Evan tell you about that land, the one his grandfather left us? Evan's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. What Wyoming property? The worthless scrubland that turned out to have natural gas deposits. Sold it quietly, invested the money even more quietly. It's all quite safe, managed by trusts you'll never touch. Emily's education is fully funded. By the way, has been since she was 5. The rest? Let's just say I've made arrangements. Mallory was already packing his briefcase, recognizing a sinking ship. I think I should... Sit down, Mr. Mallory. My voice could have cut glass. We're not quite finished. You see, there's one more document in my envelope. I pulled out the small digital recorder I'd hidden in my purse, pressing play. Their voices filled the kitchen. Once she's declared incompetent, we'll have full control. $8.5 million for the whole property. She's practically comatose half the time anyway. I'll tell her it's for her Medicare, something about new regulations. She gets confused with all that government stuff anyway. I let it play, watching their faces cycle through shock, rage, and finally fear. The recording quality was excellent. The device had cost a small fortune, but it was worth every penny. Maine is a one-party consent state for recordings, I said conversationally. I looked it up, but elder financial abuse, that's illegal everywhere. Criminal charges, civil lawsuits, professional disbarment for you. Mr. Mallory, prison time, potentially. Mom, Evan started, reaching for me. This is all a misunderstanding. Don't... I stood up, steady as a rock. Don't you dare call me Mom. A son doesn't plot to steal from his mother. A son doesn't plan to lock her away so he can pillage her life's work. I picked up my phone, my fingers sure and steady on the screen. My real lawyer is Kenneth Brennan at Brennan & Associates in Billings. His number is already dialed, one button, and this recording goes to him, to the county prosecutor, and to the elder abuse hotline. Your choice. They looked at each other, trapped animals realizing the cage door had already closed. What do you want? Evan asked finally, his voice small and defeated. I want you to leave. Now, Don't contact me again. Don't come to the ranch. Don't call. If I see any of you on my property, the recording goes to the authorities. If you contest my will when I die, the recording goes public. If you so much as speak my name in anything but respectful tones, everyone in 3 states will know what you tried to do." Mallory was already at the door, fumbling with the knob. Sophie stood frozen, her perfect makeup cracking along with her composure, but it was Evan I watched. My son. Seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time, the saddest part, I said quietly, is that I would have given you everything. All you had to do was love me, respect me, treat me like a mother instead of an obstacle, but you couldn't even pretend to do that. They stood frozen in my kitchen like actors who'd forgotten their lines. The silence stretched until Mallory finally broke it, his voice cracking. "This recording, it's not admissible. You can't I?" I smiled, the expression sharp as winter frost. "Let's discuss what I can do. Mr. Mallory, I can send this recording to the Montana State Bar Association. I can file a complaint with the Attorney General's office about your predatory practices targeting the elderly. I can ensure that every potential client Googles your name and finds a detailed account of today's attempted fraud." I pulled out a second item from my purse, my smartphone, modern and expensive. Nothing like the ancient flip phone they'd seen me struggle with during their visits. "I've already uploaded the recording to 3 different cloud services," I continued, showing them the screen. "My friend at the county tax office, Janet Morrison, has a copy in her email drafts, ready to send if I don't check in by 2 p.m. My banker, Tom Rodriguez, has another copy. Oh, and did I mention, Tom's brother is the county prosecutor." Sophie finally found her voice, venom dripping from every word. "You manipulative old—" "Careful," I warned. "Every word you say now is being recorded too. This house has been wired with security cameras for 3 years. Didn't you wonder why I never complained about the vandalism to my garden last spring? I have lovely footage of you pouring herbicide on my tomatoes." That had been a small cruelty, but revealing. She'd killed my plants because I'd asked her not to wear her muddy shoes in the house. Such a petty revenge, but it had confirmed what I'd suspected. She was capable of anything. "The Wyoming money," Evan said suddenly, his accountant's mind still trying to calculate. 15 million? Mom, we could... We? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. There is no we. Evan, that money is already distributed. Charitable foundations, scholarships for local kids, wildlife preservation funds, and yes, trusts for Emily and any other grandchildren. Trusts you can't touch, managed by people who actually have their best interests at heart. I moved to the window, looking out at my great-grandfather's oak tree. You want to know the beautiful irony? If you'd been a loving son, if you'd visited because you wanted to see me instead of calculating my net worth, if you'd shown 1 ounce of genuine care, you would have inherited everything I could legally leave you. Millions. Evan, enough to live comfortably forever. But now, I turned back to face them. Now you get exactly what you've earned. Nothing. You can't cut me out entirely, Evan protested. I'm your son. There are laws. Oh, I'm not cutting you out, I assured him. My will, properly executed and ironclad, leaves you something very special. Would you like to know what it is? Despite everything, hope flickered in his eyes. Even now, the greed remained. $1, I said softly. 1 single dollar, which proves I didn't forget you. My lawyer insisted on it, said it prevents you from contesting the will on grounds of oversight. The rest goes to Emily's trust, to various charities, and to the people who've shown me genuine kindness over the years. Maria, who cleans my house and actually asks about my day. James at the grocery store, who carries my bags without being asked. Doctor, Winters, who saw through my act but kept my secrets. The smartphone in my hand buzzed, a text from Janet. You okay over there? Saw that lawyer's car. I typed back quickly. Perfect. Stand down. She's watching. I told them. Janet lives on the next ranch, former Army intelligence, retired here for the quiet, but she keeps her skills sharp. Funny how you never bothered to know my friends. Mallory was edging toward the door again. This time, I let him go. He slunk out like the parasite he was, probably already calculating how to distance himself from this disaster. "Get out," I told Evan and Sophie. "Pack your things and leave. You have 10 minutes. 10 minutes, Sophie screeched. "We drove 14 hours. Then you'll have 14 hours to think about what you've done. 10 minutes, or I call Sheriff Davidson. He's been waiting for my call. By the way, seems Mr. Mallory has quite a reputation for elder fraud in the county. Bob would love an excuse to investigate him properly." They scattered like roaches when the light comes on. I heard them upstairs, throwing things into bags, arguing in harsh whispers. Sophie broke something, probably deliberately, but I didn't care. It was a small price for freedom. 8 minutes later, they were at the door. Evan looked back once, and for a moment, I saw the boy he'd been curious, loving, full of dreams. When had that child disappeared? When had my son become this stranger willing to destroy me for money? "Mom," he started. "Goodbye, Evan." I closed the door in his face and turned the deadbolt through the window. I watched them load their car. Sophie was gesturing wildly, probably plotting their next move. Evan looked defeated, shoulders slumped, the reality finally sinking in. Their car kicked up dust as they drove away, and I stood there watching until they passed through the gate. Then I picked up my phone and made one more call. "Kenneth? It's Margaret Lawson, yes. They just left. You'll have the recording within the hour. I want to discuss updating my will. Seems I need to adjust Evan's portion to that dollar we discussed. And Kenneth? Thank you for suggesting I document everything. Your instincts were perfect." Word travels fast in a small Montana town. By the next morning, the story had already begun to spread. Janet Morrison, true to her intelligence background, had shared select details with a few key people. Not the embarrassing specifics, but enough. Evan Lawson and his wife had tried something shameful with his elderly mother, and Margaret Lawson had sent them packing. The coffee shop buzzed with whispered conversations. At the post office, people who'd barely noticed me before now nodded with newfound respect. Tom Rodriguez at the bank mentioned that Mallory had closed his local accounts and left town in a hurry. Good riddance. Within a week, Sheriff Bob Davidson called to inform me that the state was opening an investigation into Mallory's practices. 3 other families had come forward with similar stories. Emboldened by news of his failed attempt on the Lawson Ranch, my recording would be crucial evidence. "You did a brave thing, Margaret," Bob told me. "Most folks just suffer in silence." But the real vindication came 2 weeks later in an unexpected form. A letter arrived, addressed in careful teenage handwriting. "Emily, dear Grandma," it read. "Mom and Dad told me we can't visit anymore, but they won't say why. I wanted you to know that I still have the doll you made me. I've kept it hidden all these years. It's beautiful, and when I look at it, I remember the stories you told me about our family. I'm 16 now, and in 2 years, I'll be 18. Then no one can stop me from visiting. Please wait for me. Love, Emily." Enclosed was a photo, Emily holding the doll, smiling. She looked like my mother. Same determined chin, same wise eyes. The family legacy would continue, just not through Evan. I wrote back immediately, telling her about the trust fund waiting for her, about the ranch that would be preserved forever, about the strong women who'd come before her. I promised to be here when she was ready. The autumn days grew shorter, but my life felt fuller than it had in years. Without the shadow of Evan and Sophie's visits, I could breathe freely. I stopped pretending to be confused, stopped hiding my capabilities. Maria nearly fainted when she found me using my laptop to video chat with a professor friend in Seattle. "Mrs. Margaret, you know computers?" "Oh, Maria," I laughed. "I know many things." The truth spread through town like wildfire. Margaret Lawson, the poor, confused widow, was actually sharp as a tack and rich as Croesus. The woman they'd pitied was a secret philanthropist who'd been funding the local food bank, the library expansion, the after-school program for at-risk kids. 3 months after that fateful morning, I received a final communication from Evan, a letter from his lawyer threatening to contest the will despite our agreement. Attached was a laughable claim that I'd been unduly influenced in my estate planning. I forwarded it to Kenneth Brennan with a simple note: release the recording. The lawsuit never materialized. Instead, I heard through the grapevine that Evan and Sophie had divorced. Apparently, when the prospect of easy millions evaporated, so did their marriage. Sophie took him for what little he had in the settlement. There was poetic justice in that, I supposed. On a crisp December morning, I stood by Harold's grave, telling him the whole story. The cemetery was peaceful, snow dusting the headstones like nature's blessing. You always said I was tougher than I looked. I told his stone. Guess you were right. A red-tailed hawk circled overhead, riding the winter thermals. Harold had loved watching them hunt, patient and precise. I'd learned from them, too, how to wait, how to watch, how to strike when the moment was perfect. Back at the ranch, I made coffee and settled into my rocking chair, not to pretend to sleep, but to plan. The Nature Conservancy wanted to discuss creating an educational center on part of the property. Emily would be 18 in less than 2 years. There was still so much to do, so much to preserve and protect. The phone rang. Janet inviting me to dinner, then Tom Rodriguez, asking if I'd speak at the senior center about protecting yourself from financial exploitation, then Doctor. Winters, checking in to see how I was doing. This was my real family, the people who saw me clearly and valued me anyway, the ones who'd stood ready to help when I needed them, who'd kept my secrets and watched my back. Outside. The winter sun broke through the clouds, lighting up the old oak tree like a torch. Its branches reached toward the sky, strong and enduring, roots deep in land that would never be sold or destroyed. Like the tree, I'd weathered the storm and stood firm. They thought I was asleep. They thought I was weak, disposable, already gone. But I'd been awake all along, watching and waiting. And when they moved against me, I was ready. They thought I was asleep. But I overheard everything. And in the end, I won. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please drop a comment below and let's connect if this story resonated with you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Margaret's situation? I can't wait to read your perspectives.